Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments. Today, our guest is Matthew Toth. Matthew is the founder of C3 Technology Advisors. C3 Technology Advisors was started in November 2008. Matthew says he will never quite forget family and friends questioning the wisdom of starting a company just as the economy started to crumble in the United States. Although Matthew had faith that C3 was what he was meant to do. So he started this journey 15 plus years ago as a one-man band. Today, he feels lucky to be surrounded by incredible consultants, engineers, marketers, project managers, and more who now service clients on a wide range of technologies. Matthew is the father of one amazing girl and the husband to a police officer. He likes to golf, work out, read, and spend time with his friends and family. Today, we are going to talk about setting expectations and taking the time to truly know your team members' passion and way of thinking and how it can drive your organization forward. Let's dive in. Hi, Matthew. Thank you for being a guest today. We really appreciate you being here. You have a very interesting, great story on what defined you as a leader, and I'd love for you to dive into what that is as we get started.
Thanks for having me, Stacy. It's a story that's pretty near and dear to my heart. I'm going to try my best to get through this one. It was about 2 years ago, and my father wasn't doing so well. And he was in the hospital, and we had to go put him on a ventilator. And it was really hard on me. It was hard on my family. And I'll never forget, I was up till about 2 a.m. on Thursday. And I'm thinking to myself, for Friday, I'm just going to go, and just kind of call it a day. And I decided not to, but I wiped everything off the books that day. And all I did was went up my Teams feed and just started calling people. Every single person I could possibly find that at some point in the day had gone on green, and just asked them how they're doing. You know, I have a marketing kid at the time who was looking for a house. And I just asked, how's the house search going? You know, his wife is a new teacher, so I wanted to know about how she's doing. And I went just to every person, not about their projects, not about, hey, what about this deadline or these numbers? It was, how are you doing? And just got to know as many people as I could. And in all honesty, it was probably good for me just because I want to get my mind off of just, you know, the pain and suffering I was going through at that moment in time. But it never brought me closer to the people at C3. And that was the best day I've ever had at C3, was getting to know all those people at a much deeper level. And yeah, I still hold on to those conversations. And I try and do that every once in a while, just an hour or two here and there, because I loved that day. It was such a good day. It really was, in this strange way, because I was really in pain. But it was so good to hear about all the people at C3 and their own personal stories and how they were doing. I still enjoy those conversations. I still think about them to this day.
Thank you for telling that story. Being vulnerable like that is part of leadership, and really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners and how valuable it is for having those relationships with our team members. And after you and I've talked, there's something else special that you still do today. You are a remote company, which is an interesting time. You've been remote way before COVID.
Yep.
And so let's share with our listeners what you do with your team members today that's similar to that.
Yeah, so from the very beginning, you know, we've all been remote. There's some of us in Grand Rapids, Detroit, Chicago, East Coast, all this. I knew this was going to be how we were going to run the companies from the very beginning. How do you create moments of where two people get to know each other? You know, no one talks about water cooler talk in a glowing manner, but it's actually, I feel like it's this essential part of how, you know, how people bond. So I just thought, all right, how are you going to do this? And you just got to be very intentional about it. So there's a couple of things we do. The orientation. I personally do a 2.5 hour section of the orientation. I'm on video the whole time. I start that precedent of all of us being on video from literally day one. So we start with that. All internal meetings, they're all video. Even when you're on a call with a customer and they don't go on video, I want them seeing you on video so that They know that you're absorbing the things that they're saying. Just being on video all the time and at least seeing other people. Sound is one thing. I think sight is another. The other one is we do every other week to this day. We started this in COVID actually, but we just do a virtual happy hour. And we try to do as little business as possible. I love our business, so sometimes I want to talk about it, but we try not to. And we just talk about how everyone's doing, and we kind of pass the mic around, and every once in a while we'll play a virtual game or two, and it's just very relaxed. It's a very, very relaxed environment. So there's that aspect of it. And then just throughout the year, a couple of times we'll bring everyone together. You've got to have some in-person stuff. Those remote work philosophies don't just happen. Be very intentional about how you're going to build that culture, how you're going to build those philosophies. You can't just let it happen.
So true. And I work with a lot of my clients that building culture is always key. I agree with you. It's lead by example. It's show the way. And I love the word intentional as well. Now, being in technology, we know that a lot of technologists are introverted. Being behind the camera, it's a little bit easier to come out and be more vocal and collaborating with the teams. What do you do to help bring that out and help create a safe space for your team members to do that?
Safe space to be on video. One of them is starting with this. Nothing good comes from you just being comfortable all the time. Nothing. So all the good things that have ever happened to you in your life started somewhere on this journey with you being uncomfortable. So the places that we're going to go to tomorrow, the day after, the places that are uncharted are all going to be uncomfortable. I think that being uncomfortable is this path to actual growth. So starting with this mindset that this is how you become better as a human being. So that would be the first one. The second one, I want to make sure I phrase this correctly because I can do all this in about 4 minutes. So jump in the shower, throw a razor, throw a shirt on. I want to tell all the women in our organization, you know what, if you want to spend 2 minutes or 2 hours getting ready in the morning, either way is fine. We're not going to judge you. I want you to just do whatever is comfortable without it being a burden in your life. Probably term it slightly differently, but it's something along those lines. I want everyone feeling that comfort. And I just think it always goes to no matter what, I'm on video. Even if I got my phone, even if I'm making lunch on a noon call, I've still got my phone and my video. You might watch me, eating lunch, but you're going to see me throughout that time.
I love that. Just be yourself, making it comfortable. I love those ideas that you have there. So talking about tough times as a leader, and you've said it, my favorite mantra is if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And you actually chose to start C3 during a very interesting time in the economy. So would you like to talk about that a little bit?
I spent 8 years working for big telco companies. And what I found is that the rungs in corporate America on that ladder can be very slippery. And it was my time to slip on a ladder back in October, November of 2008. I don't know if it's the depths of, or we're approaching the depths of the Great Recession. And everyone looked at me like, you're sure that you want to do your own company right now? Versus just getting a job, waiting it out. But I had faith that, well, the world isn't going to hell in a handbasket and that it will recover. I was kind of done with climbing that ladder. And there's many more stories beyond that. But I just took all the compilation of all those stories. I'm like, I think I could start something different. But it was a hard time. I mean, I'll never forget in the first 14 months of C3, I think I made $24,000. It was just winning like one customer at a time, one project at a time. And it was hard to do it during that time. But I mean, heck, we just talked about the fact that if it's uncomfortable, it's probably helping you grow. I wouldn't change any piece of where we started and when we started, though.
I think it's really interesting to go from corporate America to starting your own company. Any pieces there, any advice for our listeners of what you might need, how you think differently, how you act differently, things to do different if you transition from large corporation to either your own or small corporation?
If you're ever thinking about doing something on your own, even if you're just thinking about it, something you should do is there's probably 3 to 6 people along your journey where you're like, man, I loved working with that person. That person is smart as hell. That person works so hard over here. And you go to those people, you're still working corporate America, and say, you know what? There's some point in time when I might do my own thing. And I want to tell you this. I couldn't afford you on day one or day 101, or maybe even day 1001, but there is going to be a day where I'm going to knock on your door because I would love for you to be a part of my journey. Even if it never comes to fruition, doesn't that other person think to themselves like, wow, that means a lot? That's one of the most wonderful compliments you can give to someone. So what I would tell you is if you're ever considering doing that, go out to those 3 to 6 people and just maybe you cash in those chips one day. And if not, you had a good moment. So for me, that's one of the things that I did in starting the business. And I continue to do that to this day, where I'll find people and they say, no, thanks. Like I'm happy in my organization. I know. But corporate America one day is going to make a really dumb decision and you're going to question your career choices. And then maybe we have that conversation, but I'm always planting those seeds. So if you're going to do this, don't feel like you're going to do it on your own. Throw some seeds out there to some people that you think are special.
Love that idea. And planting seeds for bringing people on board and adding to your team in the future is one thing for external. As a leader, it's not always about being in the moment. It's about planting seeds for our team members too and helping them develop and thinking about their future. Are there some ways that maybe you plant some seeds for your own team?
During that orientation on day one, it's, hey, Mr. Marketer, Mr. Project Manager, Mr. Account Manager, whatever, Mrs., Mr., Mrs. This is the job that you're getting hired to do. And once you have proven that you can excel at this job, we are going to open up this curtain to all these different opportunities out there. And you might look around after a month or 2 or 6 or 12 months and say, you know what, I'm doing my job today, but that one over there, that one looks amazing. I would love to give you that opportunity to do that job. So what I ask everyone is, I want you to put your head down. I want you to excel at the job that you're given. But I want you to think about your career here, because the odds are good that if you're here for the next 20 or 30 years, you're probably not going to be doing the same job. And my biggest fear is losing someone at C3 because I didn't give them the opportunity to do something that deep down they wanted to do. But again, I'm going to go back to that start, that orientation. On day one, it's focus on the job that you have, but keep an eye on the things that everyone else does around here too. And you start to plant those seeds. And during annual reviews, random conversations with your employee, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And you ask those questions and you just plant some seeds like, hey, did you see what Joe or Bob or Jane does over here? What do you think about those things? Because when we bring people on who are really, really good at what they do, and I think we have a talent for bringing really, really good people on, there is the admission that you're not going to have one job for the next 30 years. That's unrealistic. So you've got to start planting those seeds. Otherwise, you're going to lose those people at some point in time. So I think it has to start at orientation, and I think it's something that has to be fed throughout the years. And I will bet you that 80 or 90% of the people will come to you one day and say, Matt, you know what? I've seen this over here and it looks pretty cool and it looks like it's something that C3 needs. So I'm going to go do that now. Fantastic. Great. Neato. And then we backfill this. And hopefully that thing is even more important of a job, because it's typical that we bring in someone on X job and that Y job is most often more important, more impactful than this job. So you use this as this breeding ground for doing more important things in the organization. You backfill these and you restart that virtuous cycle.
What I love about that is you're blending a couple things together there. One, you're making it safe for them to say, hey, Matt, I see that over there and I'd like to try to do that, right? So by doing that at orientation, you're admitting to them, I want you to grow. I want you to do other things. Focus on this job first that we hired you for. But when you're ready or when you see interest, it's okay to raise your hand, because not all team members know it's okay. And then knowing their passion, which goes back to the very beginning of what we started talking about, is how you really get to know your team members, what's going on in their lives, what's important to them, and tying that in. And I talk about that a lot with my clients too. You really need to know your team members' passions and tie their strengths with the opportunities there within the organization. So really great points.
Yeah, you hit on 2 things there. And we've talked about orientation a couple of times. I think most people see orientation just like, all right, these are our values and this is going to be your boss and go fill out these forms. And I see this so differently. I've lived in this bubble for the last 15 years. I haven't the foggiest clue as to how other people do their orientations. But I know that for me is the most important thing about coming on board here, where I talk to them about not what we do, but why we do it and why people stay here for 10 years. The first employee and the second employee that we ever hired are still here. You talk about those things from the very beginning. If there's one other thing I could tell leaders, it is don't sleep on orientation. And you or the highest person in the organization either needs to do the orientation or have a significant component to that. Make people think like, wow, the president of the company or the VP of my sector who is super important is spending time with just me. I think that's really important. The other thing that I was thinking about too is in talking and planting those seeds and getting people to ultimately go do more important and impactful things. You talked about passion. I love that word. Ultimately, I want people coming in to do a job that they are passionate about, that they enjoy, because if they came in at this job and they're not only eyeballing this job because it's a new challenge and such, but oftentimes they're a little bit bored with this job. They want to try something else. So if you can imagine having an entire organization where everyone's locked in at their jobs and everyone is passionate about their jobs. You can't tell me that isn't an A-plus organization from the top to the bottom, even if you have average talent. If you have people walking in that have that passion, I think that passion, that just desire to be at work every day will propel you and that company beyond even your average talent if that's what you have.
Yeah, it's team members that want to be there, that are motivated, that are part of the decision making, part of the mission of the company. Really great points. Now, you're an avid reader, as I know, and we talked about culture earlier. How do you weave in things that you've read about into building your culture?
All right, so this is one of our special sauces, and I think we're going to do this for the next few decades, at least I hope, as long as I'm at the helm. So it was a few years ago that one of our C3ers, by the way, I love the idea that new C3ers come in and we source new ideas from, hey, a new guy comes in and he's like, this is something that I used to do over here. And one of those C3ers came in and said, we used to do a book club at my old employer. And I was like, I kind of like that idea. So we tried it once or twice and we threw, at the time, we were a small organization. We threw the whole organization on one call and just said, hey, we're going to do a review of book A, book B. We can go through a couple of those. I think one of the first books was Atomic Habits, which I still love to this day and is required reading before you come on board to C3. And so we split the book actually into two parts and we talk about the book and we just go around and we have people say, I read this and I heard this and I thought about this. And then another C3er says, I read that and I heard something else different. And this is what I thought. And then someone else comes on board. And then it turns into this, oftentimes this organic discussion about not only the things in the book, but also how it connects to our lives, connects to our professions. Sometimes these are pretty involved conversations. And I knew from the very start that we hit on something special. And it's something that I'm an avid reader, but not everyone is. We make all those people do it. And the interesting thing is it makes for great discussion. I think it makes everyone more worldly, more intellectual, but it does something else. And this is one of these benefits that I never knew would happen, is when you have people read a lot together. And we're now on, I take a wild stab and say book 13, 14, something like that together. You start talking in a certain way. There is a book, and we talked about this one before, by Kim Scott, and it's called Radical Candor. It's a wonderful book. I couldn't recommend this enough for leaders. It's probably, from a leadership perspective, I think it might be the most impactful book we've ever read. And there's a story in there about a guy named Bob. And everyone likes Bob. Everyone likes Bob. Bob is a D-plus employee. So when he does a D-plus job, no one has the heart to tell this guy that wasn't a great job because they don't want to disappoint Bob. And he does this D-plus job for a few years. And then it comes to a point in time when Kim Scott has to let him go. When Kim Scott lets him go, Bob says, I don't understand. No one's ever told me this. And Kim Scott thinks to herself, oh my gosh, we've been underserving this guy for the last 3 years. He doesn't truly understand why he's being let go. I'll bet you that in our book club, we talked about that moment for a good 15 or 20 minutes. So now when I talk to someone from a leadership perspective, I tell someone, hey, we can't let person X think for a moment that they're a Bob. We're weaving a whole story into 1 or 2 words. And I don't have to go through and explain all these mini concepts. They get it in 2 words. So if you can have a whole organization that has a cheat code for how you communicate with each other, I think that puts you miles away from the competition. We talk about extreme ownership and all those stories, they're all baked into those words. So we've created our own culture, but it's a culture that is filled with words that have a meaning far beyond what they present at the surface.
That's a great story. And by the way, I love that book too. I recommend it to a lot of my clients as well. Radical Candor is a really great book. And you can say a couple of words and everyone understands the whole story about it. So one, you get to move fast as an organization,
Yes.
right? And everyone's on the same page. The other piece is as you're having those conversations, you're doing that relationship building across your team and understanding each other and how each other thinks. So I'm making a leap here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're working on projects or initiatives, now you have a better understanding of how someone thinks. So even though you did it in book club, it's actually helping you as you're moving forward with initiatives. So would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely, because you're not only talking about the statements, but you're talking about how people perceive those things. It is a little bit of a cheat code to figure out how other people think, because 2 people can read the same chapter and come up with completely different conclusions. You find out if people are optimists or pessimists. There's so many things that you can read into, use that phrase, dad joke. When you have those conversations, you really do get a better understanding of how people think.
You said you're on book 13, 14. So you've been doing this a while and
Yep.
you're an avid reader, but I'm guessing that not every single team member that participates in this is, and we know we have Audible books and stuff, but what are maybe a couple of points? Like how often do you meet? Maybe some tricks that you can help get people engaged if these leaders wanted to do a book club as well.
Yes, I do have some, because there's been a couple of people that said, Matt, we're not all avid readers. We can't read at the pace that you're reading at. Because I wanted to do one every 2 months, and I relented and just said, okay, this is a really good pace. So you take 1 book per quarter, and you read the first half in 1 month, the second half in another month, and 1 month of no required reading. So it gives everyone a little bit of a break. It gives everyone a little bit of time to read each half. But I would tell you to chop it up into sections unless it's a small book. And I honestly think if you take on 4 books per year, I think that's probably a pretty decent clip. If you have a whole group of people that are avid readers like me, maybe you can get away with 6. Probably not, though.
I like that methodology. Now, how often do you meet as a team to discuss the book?
Technically 8 times per year. So, because we'll chop books in half and do 1 book per quarter. So first half, second half, and first quarter of a book. First half, second half of a book, second quarter. So 8 times per year. And those meetings will typically go for about 45 minutes. We've had them go all the way up to an hour before. And what I would tell you is there gets to be a point when you have too many people like that are in that book club. As we have gotten bigger, we've separated them into groups. So we'll have book club leads for each of the conversations. So 14, 15 people per group is probably even pushing it, because you want everyone's opinions heard. That is an absolute max before you need to start splitting this off into groups. I know in the large organization, this might be really hard to do. What I would at least tell leaders, though, is at least read this amongst yourselves. Take all the leaders, take all your C-levels, your VPs or whatever, and at least do all those things. At least have a cheat code for how you talk about things amongst yourselves.
Great points. Thank you for sharing those for our listeners. As a leader and as an owner of an organization, we know that it is so important to have really good thinking time to be strategic. So how do you do your best thinking?
It's so funny because I just changed that this year. The first one is I'm an avid walker and talker. I think sometimes we find ourselves like tethered to our chairs and we sit here for 8 or 9 hours at a time. And I think you have to walk and talk. So I've gone to the extreme and I have a long desk and it is essentially a treadmill. I'll go once or twice a day to walking on that for somewhere between half an hour and 2 hours. But after listening to a whole bunch of interviews with some of the top business people out there, I caught on to something. And it was funny because they were asked the same question. It was, where and how do you do your best thinking? It was Zuckerberg and Gates and a few other people that said, well, I'm walking my backyard or I'm walking through this nearby park. And I heard this term multiple times. I was like, wait a minute, they're all walking. they're all moving around. They're not sitting at their desk all day. I really try to get as much walking in as I can. I think getting all that brain power going, I think is really important. The second one is, and this is a pretty big change for this year, at least for me, is wide open spaces. There's one of our books that was called The Focus Project that we read last year. What I've essentially done is I'll go meeting, and I might go into 3 or 4 back-to-backs, but then I go into 3 hours of just project work and nothing work. Because what used to happen is I'd have a meeting at 8:30 and then 10:30 and then one at 11:30 and then at 1 and at 3. And then you just find yourself doing these small mini things. You're keeping up on email and you look at the end of the day and you're like, what did I accomplish? I'm going to have my lunch and then I'm going to work on all this in one big block, so that I can focus. I go on do not disturb. I don't have those little dings on emails, and I just knock out 3, sometimes even 4 hours worth of work at a time. And man, that's really been an unlock for me, instead of doing work in 15, 20, 30-minute increments.
All right, there's that sound. It's time for our fun questions. Are you ready for the questions?
All right, let's do it.
Okay. For our listeners that listened to season 1, we changed up the questions for season 2. So, Matthew, if you were an animal, what would you be and why?
I'd be a dolphin. Because think about it. Have you ever seen a pissed off dolphin, a depressed dolphin? They always look like they're in a party. They're having a good time. They're squeaking and clicking at each other. It looks like a 24/7 party. It looks like everyone's having an awesome time. So I'm sure that's in my own mind. Yeah. So I want to be a dolphin.
I love that. I can't picture a ticked off dolphin.
No,
so you are
always happy. Permagrin. Big smile all the time. Yes.
I love it. All right. Next question. What's the most unusual hobby you've ever tried or would like to try?
So I go down to Florida to get out of the doldrums of Michigan. For this year is 2 months. Most years it's maybe a month or so. And on really windy days, I can see kite surfers out there. And they have that big whatever parachute thing out there, and they're holding on to it, but they're also surfing at the same time. I'm like, how hard is this? That looks impossibly hard. But man, they look like they're having so much fun going up and down the shoreline. I would love to be able to do that. So this is more on the try. I did part of this one time and failed dramatically, but I would love to, I'd love to do that one day.
All right, kite surfing. Next time we talk, you're going to have to show us some pictures now that you're down there, right?
Oh, yeah. I'll show you pictures of other people doing it. I don't know if I've got the time or the skill to do it, but I sure would like to try it.
Great. Well, thank you, Matthew, for today. A couple of nuggets that I took away were really get to know your team members, understand their passion, set expectations, have a safe environment, build a culture of transparency and learning and understanding of each other through whether it's building it with the reading and terminology or just talking is really a key thing. And persevering, making sure that you really are intentional with what you're doing, taking the time to think. I love the blocks of time that you talk about and the walking while you're doing it. Really appreciate it. I know our listeners have a lot of great nuggets to take away. If anyone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
I'm not really a Twitter, TikTok person. Drop me a LinkedIn message, my email, mtoth@c3techadvisors.com. It's just the traditional methods. I won't go as far back as saying, snail mail me an email or a LinkedIn message. And I love connecting with people in general. So much of my career and so much of my success depends on other people. So I would love to have other people reach out.
Great. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Stacey.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way. They may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at tap_be-the-game-changer.
And StaceyCaster_. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacey Caster, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
This is Tracy Ann Palmer, and be the change you wish to see in the world.